Welcome everyone to tonight's presentation at Parent University of the overview of our ESSA grants in Portland, Maine. And to introduce me is Dr. Grace Valenzuela.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Parent University. And tonight we have a very exciting presentation that is part of a series that we were looking at about school funding. And tonight we're going to talk about federal funding through our ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, an overview of that, the grant. Tonight, Gail Cressy, who is our Director of Grants and Academic Resources, will do our presentation. And welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Grace. I'm happy to be here tonight. And so I've had the good fortune of working in Portland Public Schools for the past 14 years. And during that entire time, I have been focused with one way or another on these grants under the Every Student Succeeds Act. And the Every Student Succeeds Act is a reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, which was a landmark legislation, an equity move to fund schools with additional federal funding, particularly focused on schools of high needs, students that may have been underperforming, or high poverty schools. And so each year we are eligible to apply through the Department of Education in Maine for our share of federal ESSA funds, which is determined by the federal government because we are a large enough municipality in the state of Maine that the federal government sets our allocations. And so we start planning this around the time we do budget in Portland Public Schools, and we get public input, and then the application is worked on by schools and departments and me, and we submit for funding on August 1st and cross our fingers that we'll get approved for our grants. And so tonight, I'm going to go over sort of what each funding stream does in hopefully layperson's terms, and then the approximate amount of money that we get annually, because it can be fairly consistent, and then what Portland is doing with that money this year after going through our input in the spring and early summer. So first of all, I'm going to talk about each title. And so Title I, which is labeled as Supporting Disadvantaged Youth, is to provide children with an opportunity to receive a fair and equitable high-quality education and to close the educational achievement gap. And those funds are targeted to high-poverty schools. You need to be at least at the district's average poverty or above 35% to be eligible for Title I funding. And that funding goes directly to schools to support students. We do have some required set-asides, but most of the money goes directly into schools to support the education of our students. Another title under ESSA is Title II, and that's Ensuring Effective Teachers and Leaders, and people think of that funding stream as the one that supports high-quality professional development. And so we use those funds to ensure that we have professionals that have the knowledge and understanding to support our students. We also are eligible for Title III, which is supplemental funding for support for multilingual learners. You have to, in the state of Maine, have enough students to garner a minimum grant of $10,000, and we meet that threshold handily. And again, this supplements what the local budget provides for our multilingual learners, and is in addition to what's required of us through our LAU plan. And the final funding stream is Title IV, and this title was brought back into a more robust funding stream when ESSA was reauthorized in 2015 under President Obama, and they really the government tried to respond to the fact that the prior authorization, No Child Left Behind, really focused on reading and math. So, and school systems lost support for like the arts, integrated studies, technology. And so Title IV brought back some of that funding, and there are 3 categories of funding supported under Title IV. There's technology integration, well-rounded students, and safe and healthy schools. And so those are the major funding streams under ESSA. So now I'll go a little bit deeper under each title in terms of what some of the basic requirements of that title, and then how we use the funding in Portland this year. So we are required to have a set aside off the top before we give money to schools to support our homeless youth. And so in the past, we have done things like support our McKinney-Vento liaison salary and benefits. We can support transportation if our yellow bus system can't make a route for a student who has chosen to stay in their school of origin. We can access Title I funds to augment what our local district can do. And we have supported our schools that have the highest density of students experiencing homelessness with additional staff, such as educators at Street Academy and additional social work support at our high need schools. Because of the amount of funding that we receive in Title I, we're also required to set aside at least 1% for parent engagement activities. You can take some off the top for district-based. It's not very much money, and so we just we move that money directly into our Title I schools. We are also required to serve any non-public school in the city that has enough income-eligible students. And so we do have a school in Portland, St. Bridget's School, applies every year for their title funding, and they get an equitable share of the funds to provide services to academically needy students at St. Bridget. We are required to do an annual needs assessment to get input, to assess the health of our system. We were very fortunate this year that we had the big strategic plan process, and so we were able to use some of the work that Attuned did and the district did to really see the state of the state and know what our needs are. So it's always aligned to the district goals and school goals. One of the moves we made in the budget this year was to really ensure some consistency in staffing across the eligible Title I schools. So we're supporting roles like instructional coaches, reading interventionists, math specialists, and school climate and culture coordinators. I already talked about how schools are eligible and the school and climate and culture coordinator. So that's kind of a high-level overview of Title I. In Title II, this slide shows what you can focus your funds on, one being sustained and evidence-based professional development and strong teacher leadership, and that is the area that Portland is using the funds for. So we are supporting, in addition to using Title I funds for instructional coaching, we are using Title II funds as well. Embedding a coach in a school is seen as high quality embedded professional development rather than sending someone to a workshop for one day. So we're using funds that way. We support the International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program at Ocean Avenue School by supporting that coaching position. And then the middle school strategists, we also support, who are coaches at the middle level. There are other allowable activities, such as supporting pathways, induction and mentorship, meaningful evaluation and support, and transformative school leadership. And in my tenure here, we have allocated some funds in those areas, but we're currently really focusing on that, the coaching and embedded PD. As I said, we also receive a significant portion of Title III funds, and so we are required to fund 3 different domains of supporting our English language multilingual learners. And the primary way we supplement our local effort is providing supplemental language instruction to our multilingual learners. And we do that in Portland through supporting our language acquisition ed techs. We also are required to provide high quality professional development, either to classroom teachers and or our ESOL teachers. And so we have a plan in place to run some courses this year to support both our general education and our ESOL teachers. We are also hoping to continue to run a language class for our educators. We have a lot of students speaking Portuguese and Spanish, and so we've been able to use Title III funds in the past to do language classes for our staff in schools, so they have some ability to communicate with our students without relying on a language acquisition at Tech or our talented staff at Multilingual. And finally, like Title I, Title III is required to set aside funds to engage family and community in the education of our multilingual learners. And so we've been able to support English class for parents at Reiki who are Spanish speaking, sort of entry-level language class before you would go to like an adult ed class. We have plans in place this year to create some video in different languages to make available to families so that they have an understanding of how schools work in Portland Public Schools. And as I said, Title IV has 3 domains that we are allowed to write projects for. Well-rounded education, and this is like the kitchen sink of the title, where there's a bunch of different curriculum areas that we can either provide professional development in or provide direct service to students. So areas like STEM, music and the arts, foreign language, environmental education, volunteerism, civics, and government. And you notice you will not see reading or math on that list because that's really the domain of Title I, and this was to enhance and have a more well-rounded student experience. And then again, a nice list of options under the safe and healthy student category. There you can support initiatives like PBIS, you can work on dropout prevention, preventing bullying, preventing suicide, violence prevention, and all of those domains you would imagine would fit under a safe and healthy student. And like all of the title work, it has to be supplemental to the core, and it has to be research-based. And finally, the effective use of technology. So really integrated technology, a focus on personalized learning, making high quality resources available to our staff, and leveraging these funds so that we can have district and school-wide approaches to collaboration. So in Portland and in alignment with the requirements of Title IV, because we receive so much funding, we are required to fund in all 3 categories. So for well-rounded students, we're using the money this year and have in the past to help support our mobile makerspace, both with materials and partial funding for the teacher of the mobile makerspace. For safe and healthy students, we are using our Title IV funds to augment what we can do with Title I to support those school culture and climate coordinator roles. And then for the effective use of technology, we have a project where we're getting some software. We've been creating just-in-time tech tutorials, so asynchronous modules that staff can access at their convenience. Our library and media specialists really are becoming an extension of the mobile makerspace. So those are STEM and makerspace centers as well. So we've been providing professional development for those staff to ensure that they have the skill set they need to work with students to continue the work of our mobile makerspace teacher. And then we're building a library of professional resources. And some of the requirements under this is you can't use more than 15% on hardware and software, so that's why you don't see a long list of tools or hardware that we're purchasing. The focus is on teacher training or can be direct services to students. You have to put it in high-need schools, so we have to explain why we're giving money to certain schools, what their high need is, and we have been focusing those funds on the Title I elementary schools. And as I've said, for each of the titles, you need to employ research-based strategies. And so this is just a quick overview of funding, so you get a sense of how much funding we get. Unfortunately, for this year, we did lose funding. It had been stable for years, but aside from Title III increasing and Title IV remaining stable, Title I took a big hit this year, and so we've been working really hard to ensure that we're getting schools adequate resources given the decrease. But we get almost $3 million in these title funds across the 4 titles annually. And that is my presentation for tonight. And does anybody have a question? Ms. Opperman.
The question is Title I go into schools other than elementary school?
No, that's a great question. Thank you. We actually have a choice as a school district about whether we want to do a strict poverty ranking, so highest poverty school and stop at the 35% threshold, or if we want to prioritize by grade span. So we have prioritized by grade span. It's our equity move at elementary. It gives, we don't fund schools differently according to their poverty rate in the local, so this is the move to give our higher poverty schools additional funding, so they get an enhancement, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, is the decrease in funding because of our numbers, or is that limited money available for the funds?
So the state of Maine, and Portland in particular, from the federal perspective, isn't getting poorer as rapidly as other places in the country. So we got less as a state, and then the city for sure is seen to have some wealth, and so that's why we got a decrease. And our loss in Title II funding, some of it has to do with who we were allowed to count as students in our city limits. Even if they lived here and didn't attend here, and they might have attended a non-approved non-public school, we got a share of funding for them because that funding wasn't going to an unapproved non-public school, and they heard from the federal government that wasn't quite the way to do it, and so they had to make an adjustment to the formula. Well, I hope everyone found this presentation informative and helpful. And it was my pleasure to be here and spend the time with you.